I spent the last year renovating this dusty old basement and turning it into my dream filmmaking YouTube studio space. I'm gonna take you on a journey and show you exactly how I did it. So buckle up and let me take you through the journey of this build out and show you some of the cool things I was able to do with the space that I was afforded. When me and my wife bought this house in 2019 and moved in, the basement was in rough shape. We remediated a mold situation, painted the floors and the walls, installed the bar top over the bar that was already here, and moved in furniture. There was too much to focus on with the rest of the house, so we only worked on the basement to make it presentable. But after a couple of years of doing home projects on the rest of the house, and after my business started taking off, I decided that I really needed a space I could call my own. So after a lot of planning, it finally came time to demo. I started by removing the bar and the tongue and groove walls to reveal plywood underneath. Once the walls were stripped, I took down the drop ceiling for several reasons. One, and most importantly, I needed the extra height. And two, the current drop ceiling was in rough shape and needed to be taken down anyways. This basement has a standard 8-foot ceiling, which is terrible for video work. Ideally, you want the ceiling to be as high as possible. If I were building the space from scratch, I would make it at least 10-foot ceilings at a minimum. But with this space, it is what it is. Losing the drop ceiling gave me the extra few inches I desperately needed to allow myself to install a grid system so I could hang lights for the studio. A few surprises were waiting for me, namely a couple dead mice and hundreds of peanuts. Overall, the entire ceiling insulation teardown job was just dirty. It made me feel good knowing I was getting all that junk out of the basement. Once the drop ceiling was removed, it was time to work on cleaning up the mess of wires. Today, my father-in-law is gonna come over and help me do the electrical work. There's a lot of junk in here that we're gonna take out, and then I need to find some places where I'm gonna mount some outlets in the ceiling for my lights. We can hide wires and that kind of thing. Once that was complete, it was on to painting. I went with a matte black primarily to hide the imperfections of the exposed ceiling, but also to control light spillage when filming. To paint this by hand would have taken forever, so I ended up buying a paint sprayer from Harbor Freight that worked nicely. I got my Breaking Bad on and spent a few nights just getting covered in paint. I was a little worried that the black would make the room feel more closed in, but it didn't really feel that way at all to me. If anything, because I gained an extra few inches in height, it felt bigger. An exposed ceiling is also great for running wires for power and video, and it's great for me now if I ever need to add anything in the future. There is one massive drawback to this exposed ceiling, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Sheetrocking the walls was next, and if there's something I hate more than electrical work, it's probably sheetrocking, so I had a friend of mine do it. I helped for the first day or so as we got everything on the walls, but I bounced before the taping and mudding presented itself. While this time lapse is going, it's probably a good time to talk about the plywood on the walls. I could have removed this when I took down the tongue and groove planks, but I figured it was already up and I could use it to my advantage. If I needed to hang anything off the walls, I wouldn't need to find a stud for one. I could just screw it in wherever I needed. While I waited for Ben to come back and tape and mud the walls, I moved on to the floor. When we moved in, we painted the bare concrete to give it some consistency, but I wanted to do something more than just throw a new coat of paint on it this time. That's how I ended up deciding on epoxying the floor. It gave me more flexibility in creating a color, pattern, and a texture that I was going for, and it's more durable than paint. I figured if I hated it, in a few years I could cover it over with vinyl or something. First step was to prep the floor. I sanded down the high spots left by the bar that was there and filled in the holes with Bondo. Then it came time to lay down the epoxy. My wife and I put down a seal coat as a base and waited 24 hours to do the final thicker layer. I recruited my dad for this job because there's only a 45-minute working time with the epoxy, so we needed to get it mixed and out on the floor as quickly as possible. The black base went down first, and then I mixed a bucket of white to use as an accent and rolled it out. The end result looked a little bit heavy at first, but it mixed together nicely over time. Once the epoxy had cured, I went to work on my desk area. I didn't want to throw out the old butcher block bar top that I demoed on day one, so I recycled it as my new desktop. I bought L-shaped standing desk legs from Amazon, and with a little modification, made it work to fit the existing tabletop.
So it's definitely going to be a smaller dog leg to the right, but that's just the shape of the bar top that I'm now converting to a desktop. Much better. There, as you can see, now we have a cleaner fit here. It's nice and tight. So this is the tallest it gets. And that's the lowest it gets. This is me sitting on the ground.
When the mudding of the walls was complete, I broke out the paint, and after a while of figuring out what I wanted, I ended up choosing a bright white for the trim and something, I think it was called Sea Pearl. I think it was by Benjamin Moore for the walls. To mount my OLED TV, I bought this Ergotron Glide wall mount. While this is not cheap, it seemed like the best option to keep my monitor off my desk while still being able to keep it as a standing desk. The next job on the list was to wall mount my computer. The case I have is the Thermaltake P3, and it's actually designed to be wall mounted. The wall mount I'm using is just a simple TV mount that I bought on Amazon and that can hold the weight. The next thing to arrive was a shipment from China that was carrying my ceiling mounted grid system for my studio lights. Doing my research led me to these because they were by far the most inexpensive of any of the grid systems I could find on the internet. I took a chance on them, and I'm actually really happy with how it's worked out so far. Because of the size of the opening where the door for the storage/IT closet would go wasn't standard, I ended up building a custom frame out of 2x4s and buying wooden slat panels online to make a door. To finish it off, I bought some barn door hardware and mounted the door to slide along the wall. I boxed in the lolly column and finished it off with some sheetrock. At this point, the basement is really starting to come together. One of the last projects I had in mind was to create a built-in bookshelf desk space. I did some research online and found an image of a bookcase that I wanted to model mine after. I threw the photo into Photoshop and edited it into my space to see how it would look. This was my first time building something like this, so it definitely was a learning experience. I built the entire thing out of 3/4 inch sanded plywood and repurposed my old computer desktop as the tabletop for this. I didn't want to spend time making the cabinets, so I ordered them from IKEA, and I think they fit nicely into the design. I painted, added trim, and installed lighting to finish it all off. All in all, I'm happy with how this came out. Just don't look too hard at some of the imperfections or errors and everything will be all right. The last project was to close in the well pump and water tank. To make this area look better, I bought more of the wood slat walls from the door before. I framed out 2 doors out of 2x4s and mounted them to a French cleat. French cleat is just a really handy mounting option that lets you remove things by lifting them off the mounting point. Once I learned about this way of hanging things, I now use it all the time. I went with this method because I wanted the doors to look like one seamless wall, but because this housed all of the water stuff, I would need to access it from time to time. So now when I need to get to it, I just lift it off one side and I have total access to everything I need. This area is where I keep my backdrops as well as a short throw projector for shooting content with a virtual backdrop. I also use it when a director or a client comes over and they want to watch me edit, or if I'm just watching movies or TV with my family. To shoot in this area, I have modified the couch to use a quick release wheel system so I can move the entire thing by myself. The desk will also have wheels on it soon so that it's easier to move, but I just haven't got around to it yet. And you can see how perfectly it fits. Just fits. There's the edge of the heater, baseboard heat, and there's the trim. It just fits so nicely like that. And then I've got all of this space to be able to light and shoot. I then roll up the rug and move it out of the way. I bought a backdrop system online, and this thing has been really handy. I modified it a bit to be able to accommodate 2 rolls of 8-foot seamless paper and mounted it close to the ceiling so it was out of the way of the projector. Speaking of the projector, this projector is the AWOL Vision 2500 and I bought it brand new. I haven't played around with it enough to see exactly how it will work for my virtual work, but I hope to have some time to do that soon. The projector screen I built when I moved in 5 years ago, and it was actually designed to work with my normal long throw projector, I guess is what you would call it. You can see that there's some waves and wrinkles in the fabric. This didn't really matter so much with the long throw projector, but it's extremely noticeable with the short throw one. I haven't gotten around to fixing this issue yet, but I will do that soon. My wife's a photographer and she has shot a ton of stuff down here, and I've barely used the space, but I've got some really fun ideas that I want to try out soon. So for my ceiling mounted lights on my seamless set, I have one 12 or 14 foot length that spans the entire front, and I keep my aperture 300X right here, and you can slide it right out. So I can basically position this wherever I want it to go. I can control it via the remote, or the power pack is right here in the ceiling. I can press this power button. This right here is called a pentagraph, and what that does is it allows me to just pull straight down. And so if I needed the light to be at ground level for whatever reason, I could do that. Of course, not all the lights need to be ceiling mounted. Here I tested out the projector as a virtual background and used my light stand to fly an Aperture PT4C overhead. I will undoubtedly make modifications to all these spaces as I use them more and figure out their quirks. The rest of my grid system is actually on the other side of this boxed in I-beam. The total size of the system is about 14 by 7 feet. This footprint is big enough to allow me to shoot at any angle I want on this side of the basement. There's power in the ceiling, so I don't need to worry about tripping over wires. I haven't figured out just yet which lights I want to permanently mount in the ceiling. I have a lot of aperture lights, and so I'll probably end up going with them just so I can control everything from one app. The last section, of course, is my writing desk and bookshelf. I really come to love this thing. It's great because it stores a lot of stuff, but I also like the way it looks on camera and off. I need to figure out how best to light it, but like everything else, that's still a work in progress. I have really good ideas for turning all these blank white walls into something fun, but that'll be a different story for another time. Oh yeah, and remember when I said earlier that there was one major flaw to this whole thing? That would be the soundproofing. Yeah, there are some sound issues. This video is already getting long, so I think I'll do a more in-depth breakdown of the features of each space in a separate video. Also, drop a comment and let me know what you want to see more of. I'd like to go more in depth on what people want to see. Anyways, all told, I spent about 1.5 years getting to this point. For reference, my daughter looked like this when I started, and now she looks like this. One of the great things I love about filmmaking is that you have this vision in your head, and with hard work, perseverance, a little bit of skill, and some blind luck, you can see that vision realized. That's how I kind of feel as I come to the end of this.